Hey everybody, this is Brad from Johnson Small Engines, better known as a one-hand mechanic. If I can do it, you can too. Today we have here a Craftsman 26-inch two-stage self-propelled snow thrower, and it is a no-start condition. It's been sitting what it looks to be like for a few years. It has the Quiet Technology engine. We're going to check the gas to make sure he has gas, and customer obviously said it didn't start. All right, the gas is definitely, there's some in there, and it looks to be, let's give it a whiff. Actually, it smells like, it doesn't smell like gas. It actually smells like the aftermarket Aspen 4 or even True Fuel, but it doesn't smell like regular gasoline. So that should be a positive note depending on how this was stored. Now, I did notice that the key right here is actually sticking out. Now, this engine will not run unless this key is pushed in. And I did notice that. Also, down below here where the choke is, he actually has a little sign. He put a sticker on it saying start, which it is in the start position. So when you flip it the other, now it's on choke right now, and when you flip it this way, it's in the off position, but he just put start. So I think somebody might have been into this before, or at least he knew and probably went online and read up on it, but you can tell just by looking at it, it's been sitting around for a while. So, okay, so now we have, it's on choke. I put the throttle, 3/4 throttle. I push that switch back in again. Let's go ahead and double check the oil to make sure the oil level is correct and make sure it's not high, because if the oil level is high, then you obviously have a carburetor problem if it smells like gasoline. Be careful when you put these dipsticks back in. They have a two little nubs right here, and then one nub over here on this side. And as you can see on the tube itself, it has two little nubs here and one nub there. If you put it in backwards, it'll actually get jammed up. All right, well, oil looks brand new, and it feels like that's definitely oil. It's not gasoline. It doesn't smell like gasoline. Oil level is good. Now, there's a couple different ways we can start this. We can do the electric starter, which I'm going to do. And as I probably would suggest, if you're pulling this out in the cold, definitely use the electric starter, or you can use the pull cord. Now, I am going to pull the pull cord over just to make sure we have compression, and it's easy enough just to feel that bump, and this one does, has a nice bump, which means that you feel the compression, you feel it get hard, and then it gets easy, and then it should get back to being hard again, and that's just your piston going up and down, giving you compression, and you need compression to run the engine. Basically, you need fuel, compression, and spark, and I'm going to go ahead and we can just go ahead and see if we can fire this thing up. I'm going to go ahead and pull the spark plug wire off and put an inline spark tester in it, just so when we're cranking it over, we can confirm that we have ignition. And be careful when you take the spark plug boot off. If you pull the wire itself, you can pull the wire out of the boot. And if you do that, you're really going to have a hard time getting it back together again. So grab a hold of the boot itself, pull it out. I have an inline spark tester. You don't necessarily have to do this, but this will confirm that we have ignition. And the other way of doing it would be to spray some fuel in the carburetor, but as you can see, you cannot get to this carburetor very easily. So we're just going to go ahead and sit this in here. We're going to keep an eye on that, make sure we have spark. I'm going to go ahead and plug in the extension cord. This is the electric starter, and I always suggest using the cord that is connected to the electric starter here. Just use the same thickness cord. This is, I think, a 16 gauge, and try not to go too long. I have said in the past, don't go over 20 feet or 15 or 10 feet, but 20 feet is probably about max. It just draws a lot of amperage, and you can burn up the starter. The best thing I can tell you is do not push this button for more than 5 seconds. All right, so we have it set up to start. We're doing a couple different things here. We're going to see if we have ignition. We're going to see if this thing will fire. Everything's set up to run, and I'm actually going to prime it 1, 2, 3 times. We'll see if it'll run. We have very good spark, but it is not starting, and it is on choke. That means our throttle is set good, because if the throttle was in the off position, it wouldn't spark. So we have spark, everything's good. I'm going to try priming it a few more times and see what happens. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and drain the carburetor bowl. Okay, so what we're going to do is, underneath here is the carburetor bowl right here, and there are 2 bolts. One's on the bottom, this one here directly on the bottom, we don't want to take off. This one on the side, we do. Now you can it's a 10mm wrench, and we're going to drain. If you have any issues with gasoline on your fingers, I would highly suggest using gloves. Now what I want to do is I want to drain the fuel out of the carburetor bowl and take a look at it, and also it'll get fresh fuel. That actually looks half decent. Yeah, that looks very fresh. So I kind of wonder, I'm just going to go ahead and put this back in again. It's a little tricky to do this. All right. Yeah, so that's actually not bad as far as the quality of that fuel. So it definitely smells like aftermarket gasoline. It doesn't smell like gasoline out of the pump. So he may be using an aftermarket gasoline, like a True Fuel. Okay, because the gas is fresh coming out of the carburetor and it actually is flowing out, the next thing I would do is taking the spark plug out. This is a 13/16 spark plug socket, a deep socket. You can just use a regular normal socket if you don't have a spark plug socket, and a small extension. And I also use, it's almost like a piece of fuel line. This is just a tool that I have that actually helps me pull the spark plugs out without having the spark plug socket get actually caught up. Now, as you can see, I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but it's very, very wet, which means that either one, I flooded it, or two, we have a bad spark plug. So let's go ahead and we're going to cross this over. This is an F6 RTC torch, which is going to be the equivalent of my NGK BPR 60Ss, which I use. I like the NGK product. So here's the spark plug that I use. It's an equivalent BPR 60S. Normally the spark plug gap is going to be around 30 thousandths, 28 to 30 thousandths. Okay, so the spark plug is now gapped to 30 thousandths. We're going to go ahead and I try to put them in by hand so I don't cross thread them. Now normally I would shoot some fuel inside the engine to see if it would run and then stop, and then we know it has a carburetor problem. But because that spark plug was so full of gas, I don't want to, I want to try to get it to run with a brand new spark plug, because if it's just a bad spark plug, then it'll throw us off. So we're going to give this a shot. Now I'm going to leave everything set up, except I'm not going to prime it. I'm going to leave the choke on. Since it was so wet in that cylinder, actually, you know what? I think I'm going to try it without the choke on. And I'm going to bump it up 3/4 throttle. No choke, no prime. Switches in. I'm going to hit the button to see what we got. Okay, well, I think he had the sticker wrong, because down here where he says it's on start, I actually put it, which I thought was to the on position, and this is actually the choke position. So we may have had two different issues. We may have had a bad spark plug, but also it wasn't on choke. It was actually, it was on start, which it wouldn't have ran anyway, but why would, I flooded it with the, okay, so I flooded it with priming it a lot. So that being said, if we would have had it on here, most likely it wouldn't have started, because that's not choke. Let me just see if I can run it without the choke on. Yeah, see, the choke is in the off position. That shouldn't be start. Start would be over here with the choke on. Let's give it a try right now. Okay, so that's it. And we still have a carburetor problem, because it'll only run on choke, which is over here, and then as soon as I put it to the start position, which actually is not, this has got to come off. This is not right. So when the choke is off, it actually shuts down. So now we have to put this up on the bench and start assembling it and take the carburetor off and we'll go from there. So I want to get this up on the bench and we'll break back. Okay, so I have it up here where we can all see it together, and we need to get behind here to get to the carburetor. Can't say enough about my clip fastener tools. One on this side, and if you're good, you can get one on this side. I'm not saying go out and buy two, but a pair of screwdrivers will work. And then you prime evenly to get this to come off. Now I should be able to pull that off the rest of the way. Just picture that, take it off, make sure it goes back on the way it was. I normally take the pull cord and get it out of the way. Wrap it around here a few times. This has to come off right here, and they can be a real bugger to get. And what I have learned is put a rag around it, pair of vice grips, crimp it on, and make sure it's not, you're not going to break the plastic depending on how cold it is outside and where you're doing it. And then pull. Now be careful you don't hurt yourself. All right, that wasn't that bad. I'm kind of wondering if somebody wasn't in here already. All right, now we have to take the gas tank, has to come up out of the way a little bit, which is a 10mm socket on, we should have 4. One here. Now if you look down in here, all right, there's spacers. Okay, these spacers help protect the plastic from getting crushed. Just make sure you don't lose them when you take the gas tank off. All right, that comes up out of the way. Now, the fuel line is going to be attached to this, so we don't have a whole lot of room. We just wanted to get it up out of the way. And we have to get this off here, which in turn has 2 10mm. All right, these guys are short too. Just make sure, just want to show you here. The long bolts, all right, yeah, short and long bolts. Short bolts, there's 2 of them here. And the long bolts go up here. There's 4 of those. Okay, we have to go around to this side. And you have a bolt here and a bolt there. And these are both 2 short bolts right here. We have to get this primer hose off, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull it off the primer itself up front here. We're going to go ahead and try to pop this line off right here, the primer line. Pair of pliers. Pop it up like that. Just be careful that you don't break the plastic part right there. Now this should come out of the way right here. I'll just drop off to the side. This is the fuel line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch it here, and we're going to go ahead and take it off down here, and then we can remove this tank to get it out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and crimp it right here. We have 2 nuts that have to come off that are 10mm. This is also going to show us if the choke is in the off position. Once we take this off here. All right, so I'm seeing that we have to get, this top has to come off, which is a Phillips head screwdriver right there. It looks like the top of the carburetor is actually a bracket for the primer line right here. So that's what we were kind of fighting right there. I'm going to leave it connected because there's no reason to take it off. This should now come out. And you just have to kind of wiggle it back and forth. And we also have what's connected to this. This is the vent tube for the breather. This is the breather tube right here, which has to go back up in here. So the breather line tube has to go up through back here and then right above the spark plug. It connects right here. And I was pulling against that also. So this, you should probably take off this first. when we were pulling it out, I was pulling against that, and that's what popped off right there. So at least we know that that's out of the way. There is a gasket here. Then we can just slide this on as we're putting the carburetor back on again. Okay, so we're going to pull this off here, and you can see the choke is open. So obviously that setting was incorrect for him when he had it on start. It was in an open position, so it wasn't going to start for him anyway. But the carburetor definitely has a problem, and that's why I wouldn't stay running. So now I'm going to have to take this off just to show you guys the inside of the carburetor here. So this is where the primer line goes, on top of the carburetor here. All right. Now, this fuel line is very hard to get to with this on here, but this is very important that when you take this off, it goes back the way it came. So remember how all this is, you can always look back in the video, but I pull this off the front here, all right, like that, and then I will turn it 90 degrees, which will make it come off this right here. Just make sure when you put it back on that you're going to go back 90 degrees like that, and turn it on like this, and push it on like that. They're not making this one easy whatsoever because they actually have a flat spot right here, and that goes against the inlet, the metal inlet for the carburetor, which in turn makes it very hard to put this one back in. All right, you just have to kind of finagle it in there, just trying to make sure everybody can put it back together correctly. And I'm going to take this off, set it down, and then you have this here, which is going to be a 90 degree up, and it'll just come right out like that. And I usually put a little black mark that goes, I'll magic marker this black so I know that that went into the carburetor like that, or you can just leave it on like that until you get the carburetor off. This goes behind the fuel line, just remember that. I'm going to go ahead and leave that on for now. Now the clamp behind here, they're always hard to get off because they push them back behind here. Small pair of needle nose. Twist this around so I can see it, and then push it up out of the way. Pushes up out of the way. Use my tool and just push up. And you will have a little bit of fuel coming out of the end of this, so be careful where you're doing it. All right, that wasn't too bad. Now, I would suggest flushing this tank if it had bad gas, or if you have any doubts that the gas inside that gas tank is bad, you can always just take the gas tank off now and drain it. Okay, real easy to do. I'm going to get it out of the way just so you guys can see. So this is how this goes when you put it back together again. It goes behind the fuel line. I'm going to take it out right now. Just put it aside. Now you have to pull the carburetor out, and I can see, okay, the manifold was coming off with the carburetor. Depending on how bad this carburetor is, it did run, so I think we're going to be able to rebuild it. Now when you get the carburetor out to a certain point, all right, then you're able to take off the spring. The spring you can take off before that, but there it comes right off. Now the rod here, the governor rod has to have the carburetor halfway off before the governor rod will pop out of its slot. So keep that in mind. You're not going to be able to take this carburetor rod off if the carburetor is sitting all the way on. It won't come off. So pull it out, pull it up, out of the way. Carb will now come off. That was a little more involved than I would have liked it to be, but that's just the way they're making them. Now this gasket isn't too bad. I'm going to see, yeah, I mean, that's in pretty good shape. So we're probably going to go ahead and use that again. Let's go to the bench and look at this carburetor. So usually it'll come out the inlet, or comes out the primer line. And that gas is pretty darn clean, so whatever clog he's got in here happened a while ago. Maybe he ran it dry because the gas is clean. 10mm wrench to get the bottom bowl nut off. And it looks like the carburetor probably was not taken apart because there's 2 white dots. That usually they do that when they manufacture them and they put them together so they can tell if it's been apart or not. And remember, when you put the bowl back on, that the bowl needs to line up with your primer line, okay? So you can get to the drain. If you put it the opposite direction, your drain will be covered. You won't be able to get it. And you can see there's a little bit of crud in the bottom. That might be ethanol. It almost looks like a gritty sand. But the carburetor looks really good, even inside there where that main jet is. But even though we can't see through there, so you pull this pin, it should slide right out. Needle valve is here. I normally will check this underneath magnifying glass just to look at it and make sure it's okay. It definitely wasn't leaking fuel, so I'm sure it's going to be okay. The bowl gasket, which is right here, can actually, if you put it on wrong, it'll leak. It's round, but it's got a flat edge to it, and that flat edge has to sit into this recess. So make sure this is not twisted, and this is definitely usable because it's definitely pliable, and you can tell it's not dry rotted or anything. So now we have to get inside there and take that jet out. I ground down a screwdriver, and I also ground down this screwdriver, see which one works. You just want to find the slotted part and then carefully counterclockwise unscrew it. Now there are threads at the end of this carburetor neck right here that aren't threaded to the jet. And people are gonna be like, well, why isn't it coming out? Because I have it right now, it's probably already unscrewed as far as it'll go, but the threads right here are for this bowl nut. That's what they're for. They're not for the jet that's inside. And then you tap it after you think it's all the way out. All right, it's coming. Come on. It's just it's very tight right there, so. There it goes. I didn't want to, it all fell out at once. Main thing is, normally these jets are clogged. Let's go ahead and get my little wire. I have a little wire I poke through, and I just roll it. That's all I do, just roll it. And then you can blow through it. Now, you can see that now. Should be able to see it. Yep, big hole. All right, believe it or not, that little teeny bit of debris is probably what made this not stay running. And that's just incredible that these are so finicky. But that's why, and a lot of people complain about these newer style carburetors, but basically this is a takeoff of a Honda engine, and they're actually not bad at all. Now, this carburetor right here, the name of this carburetor, this is original from the engine. And I get aftermarket ones on Amazon. I just had a comment about Amazon aftermarket carburetors being junk. Okay, well, remember this name, and if you order one, try to get that same name on the Amazon one, and I found that you might have to spend $10 more and get a better carburetor, but they're the same as they're putting on from the factory. All right, so that jet is cleaned. This one fell out, and there's very small holes right here that we need to address. And what you can do, oh, look at that. Also see some clutter right in here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but on the end of that tip, we definitely have some stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of a spray. This is a carburetor cleaner spray. It's okay on brass. It's not going to hurt anything. Make sure you use safety glasses if you're doing something like this, because it will get you if you're not careful. And if you need to wear gloves, definitely suggest wearing gloves. I'll blow through this. Big difference. You can already see how clean it is. Much cleaner on the top end of that. So we definitely had issues. Just trying to get you guys a good picture. Definitely had issues with this too. And there's little teeny holes here, which I'm going to go ahead and spray them too. And I'm trying to do this without using an ultrasonic cleaner that I do have. This is for basically anybody at home that can just get their carburetors cleaned. All right, so everything sprayed through those holes real nice. Now getting this back in, I'm not going to do it quite yet because I do want to spray this carburetor. We have another jet on this side, and you have to remember that the idle screw is right here. This is the idle screw, And this idle screw actually holds this jet in. So just remember that when the idle screw is halfway between that jet, okay, sitting on it, then you're fine. And try just to make sure that you have the threads coming out right here. Just, you can either count them or just kind of give it a good eyeball on exactly how far that's sitting out. I just remember that this goes in, sits halfway on that jet, and you're fine. If you screw this idle jet in too far, it will actually, your engine will not come down off of idle, and it will seem like it's revving very, very fast, and you're going to have to go in there and loosen this up. And you don't want to cross thread this, so you got to be very careful when you put this back in. Okay, so there's the idle screw out. I use my clip fastener tool, pop that jet out. This jet has a little teeny hole in the top of that, and I'm going to go ahead and spray that. Very fine wire through the hole. And when this is clear, you should see the wire through the other hole. There's two holes on the side, and you can see that wire through it right there. All right, so now we're clean. Now this is where you can go ahead and spray. There are very small holes in this carburetor. There's three of them back in here, if you can see that or not. There's a couple of them back up in there. I have a very small thin piece of wire that I bend at like a 90 right there. And then I go in, try to get close in here, see if we can get this. There are 4 holes in here, and they're very hard to get to. There's one. Takes a little patience. There's 2. 3. And got the 4th one there. Okay, so we got them all. You have a hole here. Go ahead and spray into that. That's clean. We're going to go around. We have to get this hole and that hole clean. And we're going to spray these. And I go down this one right here. And then last but not least, I go down the inlet of the fuel. The nice thing about these carburetors is that they have a brass fuel inlet, which is very nice. And you do have to make sure that you do not get the carburetor cleaner on that neoprene end right there. Just clean this off with a rag. You'll be fine. I'm going to go ahead and blow this off just to get it quickly dried. All right, so everything's dry. We're going to go ahead and put this back together again. I'm going to start with this guy here. It can go in this. It only goes in one way, and basically the flat spots go against the flat spot here on the carburetor, and it can go in either way as long as one flat spot is against the flat spot on the carburetor. Make sure it's down all the way. If it's not down, pressed in all the way, the idle screw will not go in straight, and if you don't put in this idle screw straight, you will cross thread it. And again, I'm just going to go into where it's sitting halfway over the jet, which puts it sitting out just about where it was. All right, it's actually might be out a little bit too far. You don't want to have too high of an idle, but you don't want a low idle where it'll shut off. But that's just about right. I'm going to leave it go at that. I'm going to go ahead back under here now. This is important. When you put the emulsion tube back in again, the flat spot on the bottom of the emulsion tube, it's a big flat spot right there. That is where the main jet will actually press against it like this. It's going to look like that when it's inside. So you're going to put it in like this. That's just going to sit up in there. Then you're going to put your jet in. Obviously, this is pretty easy because you need to be able to screw it in. So slot head on the outside, it's just going to, it goes in pretty far before you even screw it. And then take whatever screwdriver fits just until you feel it gets snug. Do not over tighten it. There, snugged it up. This is when I put the bowl gasket on, and it goes inside the recess right here. Like this one here is not sitting quite 100%. So what I'll do is I'll just stretch them a little bit. You don't want to stretch them too much. You want to break them. But if they're in good condition, they will stretch. Now that fits perfectly right there now. I'm going to go ahead and put the needle valve in. Now this is there is no adjustment on this needle valve. It's spring loaded. Okay, so when it's sitting on here, and you can take this off, you just have to make sure that when you do take it off, that you go back in the right way and put the spring in correctly. I'll take it out real quick here just to show you. So there's the spring. That spring you can lose. You don't want to lose it. The other end right here, just make sure it's in good shape. If there's any questions about that, or sometimes actually the fake chrome, as they say, will start coming off of this stuff, and you might have to get the kit or replace the carburetor. Carburetors are very cheap, and you may just want to go ahead and replace the carb. Now this one here, you have to push up while you're holding the spring down. So you hold the spring down, and then you're gonna go up in here like that, just like so, and it's spring loaded. You go ahead and set it inside. Put your pin in, line it up. Make sure it's about even right there. And like I said, it adjusts itself. There is no float level, so you're good to go. Bowl back on again, and make sure that your drain is on the same side your primary line is. Gonna tighten that up. 10mm wrench. Nice and snug. Everything's lined up. Let's go ahead and put it back on. Put it on. I'm going to go ahead and put the governor arm in first while it's out. Slides right in like that. And I'm going to go ahead and pull. Be very careful you don't bend this. This anti-vibration spring just like that. And this gasket behind here was in good shape. We're going to go ahead and let that go. Push that back in like so with it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put the choke rod in. Just make sure you got it going in the right direction. It's very easy to put this in backwards. So it's going to look like this. And remember that our fuel line is going to be here from the carburetor. If you have any questions about the gas being bad in your gas tank, definitely flush it while it's out. It's real easy to do. This gas tank is one of the easy ones to take on and off. We're going to go ahead and put the fuel line in right here. Fuel line on. Push it down, leaving the choke rod behind it. Clamp. Now I'm going to push this around so I can get it out of the way as far as I can. Okay. Going to reuse this gasket because this gasket is not torn. Good there. Now remember that we have the valve cover breather tube right here. Before you do that, we have to put this plate on and make sure that everything is like this, and then we're going to go ahead and put this in like so, like that. All right. Get that on like that. And remember, this is open. Okay, so it's in a run position, and so is our arm right here. All right, so go ahead and line that up. Now this little pipe coming out here, the tube coming out here has to go into the tube, into the rubber tube here. It's kind of like an all-in-one. You have to kind of put it down over your studs and then push this back in so this is on. And it's easier for me. This is how I do it. You guys can do it the opposite if you want to. You could also do it the other way where you have this tube on here first and then push it all on once on the here, whichever you guys feel more comfortable doing, but I'm comfortable doing it that way. The two nuts that mount your carburetor, everything together, I try to tighten these evenly. Okay, so at this point, we can put the cap back on here, and I want to fill this up with fuel. All right. You could probably put this cap on before the gas tank, but I wanted to make sure this was all connected first. And that screw has to fit right in on there. Phillips head screwdriver. And then there should be no gap right here, okay? Because there's a little air flowing through the back here that allows air into the carburetor, and there is no air filter because obviously we don't have dust. So you just have to make sure that everything's closed off up here just in case water drips. Hopefully that won't ever be the case. This is where the primer line is connected to the carburetor, and then there's that little teeny right up in here. So if you can see back in here, there's a little bracket, and that must go into the bracket. Should have probably put that in the bracket before I put it back together again, but it's in the bracket now, which is good. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and let the fuel flow, because if there's any issues with it leaking, this is where we're going to find it. I highly recommend using Aspen 4 in all of your snow throwers. This is non-ethanol, 92 octane. It says it's easy start and excellent for long storage. This will stay fresh up to 2 years in your machine, and also it'll stay fresh about up to 5 years in the container if properly stored. And as you can see, this looks like moonshine. It doesn't smell anything like gasoline. I'm making a total mess. Much better. Just gonna go ahead and put a quart in here. You don't want to mix this fuel though. That tank I emptied. You want to make sure that you only use the Aspen 4 if you switch over to this product. Just got done putting gas in, and there is absolutely no sign of it leaking, which is good. I'm going to go ahead and full throttles to the left. Actually, it does say right here, I didn't see the markings in the beginning, but it does actually tell you which way fast is. Now, run is exactly what it said on the sticker. So this guy was just doing it wrong, because it does show to the left is choke. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and start this up. We're gonna go ahead and put the choke knob back on just for now, just so I can start it. And it was in the off position. So the choke right now is in the run position. And it does say right here, when it's to the left, it's in the run position. We're gonna go ahead and flip it on choke. I'm gonna try it without the primer line, because we are inside. It is about 70 degrees in here. All the way up on full throttle. It should still start if everything's operating correctly. I'm gonna go ahead, since we're up on the bench, we'll just try to give it a pull start. We do have the ignition switch here, which is still hooked up. All right, and this has to be in, so this is not going to hinder us. It'll still work, and we can still turn it off by this or shutting it down by this. So let's go ahead and give it a fire, see if it runs. Okay, so there we have it. That little bit of debris that was in that carburetor was stopping it from running, and we're going to go ahead and button this up. We're going to take this off. I'm going to go ahead and pull the pull cord out and wrap it around here again, just to make sure I can work around it. I'm going to go ahead and put the primer line on right here. A little hard to see. Push it on. If it's dry rotted or anything, make sure you replace that. I'm getting clocked here. The throttle lever has to go through the slot, which can be a little bit tricky. It should line up. You're going to have to pick up the fuel tank a little bit to get everything to go under, as the fuel tank lip goes over this. So it's important that you lift up that fuel tank a little bit. Everything looks good here. Everything's good there. We're gonna go ahead and put in, two top long screws. I always suggest never tighten up the screws until you have them all started. You got a small one here on this side. When you put the throttle back in, the little teeny hole is in the top. Okay, so there's a top because you have, it looks like a U or a not very happy face right there. And then that has to go in. So the hole goes up in the air and you push this in as hard as you can get it. And that'll lock in like that. And then the choke was in the run position. So we're gonna put that back, and that has to be pushed in as far as you can. Sometimes I'll take the back of a hammer or a tool. All right, so that's run, that's choke. All right, I'm gonna mark this right now. Okay, so we're gonna put run, on. So choke is on like that, run is on like this. All right, let's go ahead and fire it up one more time. Choke, I'm gonna give it a pull. So that pretty much sums up for how to diagnose and repair a no-start condition on a Sears Craftsman 26-inch electric start 2-stage snow thrower with the Quiet Technology engine. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Please subscribe, share my channel with your friends, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.